The heiress's finger hovered over the send button. Her heart pounding, she prepared to give away billions. In that moment, Olivia Hartley knew her life would never be the same. The screeching of tires and the sickening crunch of metal on metal shattered the quiet summer afternoon. Olivia Hartley's world spun violently, a kaleidoscope of shattered glass and twisted steel. As her luxury sedan came to a jarring halt, the acrid smell of burning rubber filled her nostrils, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, through the ringing in her ears, Olivia heard the distant wail of sirens. She blinked, trying to focus her vision. The windshield was a spiderweb of cracks, and beyond it, she could see steam rising from the crumpled hood of her car. "Miss? Miss, can you hear me?" A man's voice, urgent but calm, cut through the haze. Olivia turned her head slowly, wincing at the pain that shot through her neck. A face appeared at her shattered driver's side window, a man in his early 40s, with kind eyes creased with worry. I'm okay," Olivia managed to croak, though she wasn't entirely sure if that was true. She could feel warm blood trickling down her forehead. "Try not to move," the man said. "Help is on the way. I'm Michael. I'm going to stay with you until the paramedics arrive, okay?" Olivia nodded weakly, grateful for the stranger's presence. As the shock began to wear off, the reality of what had just happened started to sink in. She had been on her way to yet another charity gala, one of the countless events that filled her calendar as the heiress to the Hartley real estate empire. Now, here she was, trapped in the wreckage of her car, dependent on the kindness of a stranger. The next few hours passed in a blur of sirens, fluorescent lights, and concerned voices. Olivia found herself in the emergency room of St. Mary's Hospital, surrounded by a flurry of activity. As doctors and nurses bustled around her, she caught snippets of their conversations. "Lucky to be alive. Could have been much worse. Miracle she walked away from that crash." It wasn't until late that night, as she lay in a private room with machines beeping softly around her, that Olivia had a moment to truly process what had happened. She stared at the ceiling, her mind replaying the accident in vivid detail. The other car had come out of nowhere, running a red light and plowing into her side. If it hadn't been for the quick actions of that stranger, Michael, who knows what might have happened. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Hartley?" A tall, slender woman with sharp features and kind eyes stepped into the room. "I'm Detective Sarah Chung. I hope I'm not disturbing you, but I wanted to ask you a few questions about the accident. If you're feeling up to it." Olivia nodded, wincing slightly at the movement. "Of course, Detective. Please, come in." As Detective Chan settled into the chair beside the bed, Olivia couldn't help but notice the weariness in the woman's eyes. It was the look of someone who had seen too much tragedy, too many senseless accidents. "Can you tell me what you remember about the crash?" Detective Chan asked, her voice gentle but probing. Olivia recounted the events as best she could, describing the other car, the impact, and the aftermath. As she spoke, she found herself focusing on Michael, the Good Samaritan who had stayed with her until help arrived. "This Michael," Detective Chan said, her brow furrowed. "Did you get his last name?" Olivia shook her head. "No, I was pretty out of it." "Why? Is something wrong?" The detective hesitated for a moment before responding. "We're still piecing together exactly what happened, Miss Hartley. But it seems that the driver of the other car was intoxicated. He didn't make it." The words hit Olivia like a physical blow. Someone had died. In that moment, the reality of her brush with death truly sank in. She could have been killed, all because someone made the reckless decision to drive drunk. "There's more," Detective Chung continued, her voice heavy. "The man who helped you, Michael? We believe he may have lost his family in the same accident." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "What? How is that possible?" "From what we've gathered, Michael Reeves was in a taxi with his wife and daughter. They were in the intersection when the drunk driver ran the red light. The impact." Detective Chum paused, choosing her words carefully. "The taxi took the brunt of the collision. Mr. Reeves' wife and daughter didn't survive. He was thrown from the vehicle, which is why he was able to come to your aid." The room seemed to spin around Olivia as she processed this information. The kind stranger who had comforted her, who had stayed with her despite his own unimaginable loss. He had lost everything in that moment. I need to see him, Olivia said, struggling to sit up. I need to thank him, to do something. Detective Chen gently placed a hand on Olivia's arm. Mr. Reeves is still being treated for his injuries. And to be honest, Miss Hartley, I'm not sure he's in any state for visitors right now. The loss he's experienced, it's going to take time. As the detective left, promising to keep Olivia updated on the investigation, the heiress found herself alone with her thoughts once more. The weight of what had happened, the lives lost, the family shattered, pressed down on her like a physical force. For years, Olivia had lived a life of privilege and luxury, attending galas and charity events more out of obligation than genuine passion. She had always known, on some level, that she was fortunate, but it wasn't until this moment, lying in a hospital bed while others grieved unimaginable losses, that she truly understood the arbitrary nature of fate. In the days that followed, as Olivia recovered from her injuries, she found herself consumed by thoughts of Michael Reeves and his lost family. She tried to imagine the pain he must be going through, the void left by the loss of his wife and child. And with each passing day, a sense of purpose began to grow within her, a determination to use her resources, her influence, to make something meaningful out of this tragedy. It was a week after the accident when Dr. Emily Patel, the surgeon who had treated Olivia, came to check on her progress. As the doctor examined her healing wounds, Olivia found herself opening up about her tumultuous emotions. "I can't stop thinking about him, doctor," Olivia confessed. "About Michael and what he's going through. I feel like I need to do something, but I don't know what." Doctor Patel regarded her patient with a thoughtful expression. "Trauma affects us all differently, Miss Hartley. It's natural to want to find meaning in what happened, to want to help. But remember, you're still healing yourself." Olivia shook her head, a spark of determination in her eyes. "I've spent my whole life surrounded by wealth and privilege. Dr. Patel, I've attended countless charity events, written checks for causes I barely understood. But this feels different. For the first time, I feel like I have a real chance to make a difference." As she spoke, Olivia could feel a plan beginning to form in her mind. It was audacious, perhaps even reckless. But in that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that it was what she needed to do. "I'm going to donate my entire inheritance," she said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "To Michael, to help him rebuild his life, and to create a foundation to help other victims of drunk driving accidents." Dr. Patel's eyes widened in surprise. "Miss Hartley, that's an incredibly generous gesture. But are you sure?" "That's a life-changing decision," Olivia nodded, feeling more certain with each passing moment. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, doctor. This accident, it's shown me how fragile life is, how quickly everything can change. I don't want to waste another day living a life without purpose." As Dr. Patel left the room, promising to put Olivia in touch with the hospital's social workers to discuss her plans, the heiress felt a sense of calm wash over her. For the first time since the accident, she felt like she was on the right path. Little did Olivia know that her decision would set in motion a chain of events that would not only change her life, but would have far-reaching consequences for her city and beyond. As she lay in her hospital bed, gazing out at the bustling city beyond her window, she couldn't have imagined the challenges, the opposition, and the profound transformations that lay ahead. The sun was setting over the city skyline, painting the horizon in hues of orange and pink. Olivia watched as the lights of the towering skyscrapers began to flicker on, a stark reminder of the vast wealth and influence that her family had accumulated over generations. It was a legacy she had always taken for granted, but now, as she contemplated giving it all away, she felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear. In the fading light, Olivia made a silent promise to herself and to Michael Reeves, the stranger who had saved her life at the cost of his own happiness. She would use her privilege, her resources, and her newfound sense of purpose to fight for justice, to challenge the systems that allowed such tragedies to occur, and to honor the memories of those who had lost their lives on that fateful day. As night fell over the city, Olivia Hartley closed her eyes, her mind filled with plans and possibilities. The world outside her hospital room continued its relentless pace, unaware that a seed of change had been planted, a seed that would soon grow into a force, powerful enough to shake the very foundations of their society. As Olivia's injuries healed, her resolve only grew stronger. 2 weeks after the accident, she was finally discharged from the hospital, stepping out into the bright summer sunshine with a newfound sense of purpose. The world around her seemed different now, as if the lens through which she viewed it had been irrevocably altered. Her first stop was the offices of Hartley Real Estate, the empire her great-grandfather had built from the ground up. As she walked through the gleaming lobby, past the larger-than-life portrait of Malcolm Hartley, SR, Olivia felt a strange disconnection from the legacy that had defined her life for so long. "Olivia, darling," her mother's voice, high and brittle, cut through her thoughts. Elizabeth Hartley swept towards her daughter, enveloping her in a cloud of expensive perfume. "We've been so worried. Your father and I wanted to visit you in the hospital, but you know how he is about germs." Olivia extricated herself from her mother's embrace, fighting the urge to roll her eyes. "It's fine, Mom. I'm okay, but we need to talk." "Is Dad in his office?" Elizabeth's perfectly manicured brows furrowed slightly. "Yes, but he's in a meeting. Perhaps we should have lunch, catch up properly. This can't wait." Olivia interrupted, already striding towards the elevators. She could feel her mother's concerned gaze on her back, but she didn't turn around. The conversation she was about to have would change everything, and she couldn't afford to let her resolve waver. Richard Hartley's corner office was a testament to power and wealth, all mahogany paneling and floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city he'd helped shape. As Olivia entered, her father looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his features before settling into his usual mask of cool authority. "Olivia," he said, rising to greet her, "I didn't expect to see you back so soon. How are you feeling?" "I'm fine, Dad," Olivia replied, taking a seat across from him. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "But I'm not here for a social visit. I've made a decision, and I need you to hear me out." Richard leaned back in his chair, his expression guarded. "Go on." Olivia launched into her explanation, laying out her plan to donate her entire inheritance to establish a foundation for victims of drunk driving accidents. As she spoke, she could see her father's expression darkening, his jaw clenching with barely suppressed anger. "Absolutely not," he said when she'd finished, his voice low and dangerous. "I won't allow you to throw away your birthright on some misguided guilt trip. This company, this legacy, it's everything we've worked for. It's everything you've worked for." "Dad," Olivia countered, her own anger rising to match his. "I've never had a say in any of it, but now, for the first time in my life, I know exactly what I want to do. This is my choice." "Your choice?" Richard scoffed. "You wouldn't even have the luxury of making this choice if it weren't for the wealth and privilege this family has given you. You owe us more than this, Olivia." The words hit her like a slap, but Olivia refused to back down. "I owe it to myself to do what I believe is right, and I owe it to Michael Reeves and his family, and to everyone else who suffered because of the broken systems we've allowed to persist." For a moment, father and daughter stared at each other across the vast expanse of the mahogany desk, the weight of generations of expectations hanging heavy between them. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice cold and final. "If you go through with this, you're on your own. No more access to family funds. No more cushy job waiting for you here. You'll be cut off completely." "Is that really what you want?" Olivia stood, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. "If that's how it has to be, then yes. This is what I want. This is who I am now." As she walked out of her father's office for what she knew might be the last time, Olivia felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. She had just burned the bridges to her old life, but ahead of her lay a path of her own choosing. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Olivia threw herself into researching drunk driving laws, victims' rights, and the intricacies of setting up a charitable foundation. She reached out to lawyers, social workers, and activists, building a network of allies who shared her vision for change. It was during this time that she finally met Michael Reeves face to face. The hospital had been reluctant to release his information, citing privacy concerns, but Detective Chun had eventually facilitated the meeting. Olivia found Michael in a small, sparsely furnished apartment on the outskirts of the city. As she knocked on the door, she felt her heart racing, unsure of how he would receive her. When the door opened, she almost didn't recognize him. The kind-eyed stranger who had comforted her after the accident was gone, replaced by a man who looked as if he'd aged a decade in just a few weeks. His eyes were sunken, his face gaunt, and there was a palpable aura of grief surrounding him. "Mr. Reeves," Olivia began, her carefully prepared speech evaporating in the face of his raw pain. I'm Olivia Hartley. I don't know if you remember me, but I remember," Michael interrupted, his voice hoarse. "You're the woman from the accident, the one I helped." Olivia nodded, fighting back tears. "Yes, I wanted to thank you and to tell you how sorry I am for your loss. I can't even begin to imagine what you're going through." Michael regarded her silently for a long moment, then stepped back, wordlessly inviting her inside. The apartment was a study in grief. Boxes half-packed, pictures face down on surfaces, a general air of a life interrupted. As they sat in the small living room, Olivia explained her plan, the foundation, the advocacy work, the changes she hoped to make. Michael listened silently, his expression unreadable. "Why are you doing this?" he asked when she'd finished. "You don't owe me anything. You're not responsible for what happened." Olivia leaned forward, her eyes earnest. "I know I'm not responsible, but I have the means to help, to try and prevent this from happening to other families. I can't just go back to my old life, pretending that nothing's changed. Meeting you, seeing your kindness in the face of such tragedy, it changed everything for me." For the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed Michael's face. Not quite a smile, but a softening of his features. "My Sarah, my little girl, they always said I had a knack for helping people. It's why I became a teacher. I guess old habits die hard." As they continued to talk, Olivia felt a connection forming between them, a bond forged in shared trauma and a mutual desire for change. By the time she left, Michael had agreed to be part of the foundation, to share his story and help shape its mission. Walking back to her car, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult. She had no illusions about that. But for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Little did she know that her actions had already set larger forces in motion. In boardrooms and backrooms across the city, powerful interests were taking notice of the Hartley heiress and her radical plans. The battle for change was just beginning, and Olivia would soon find herself at the center of a storm that would shake the very foundations of the city she called home. As the sun set over the city skyline, casting long shadows across the streets, Olivia drove home to her modest new apartment. The glittering towers of wealth and power that had once been her world now seemed distant and alien. She was embarking on a new journey, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her. In the gathering darkness, a new chapter was beginning, not just for Olivia and Michael, but for a city on the brink of transformation. The seeds of change had been planted, and only time would tell what sort of harvest they would yield. The shrill ring of Olivia's phone cut through the early morning silence, jolting her awake. Fumbling in the darkness, she grabbed the device, her heart racing as she saw Detective Chun's name on the screen. "Miss Hartley." The detective's voice was tense. "I'm sorry to wake you, but there's been a development. The driver who caused the accident, he's awake." Olivia sat bolt upright, sleep forgotten. "What?" I thought he didn't make it. He was in a coma," Chun explained. "We didn't expect him to pull through, but he regained consciousness late last night. And there's more. He's a city councilman, James Mercer." The name hit Olivia like a physical blow. James Mercer. She knew him, had attended fundraisers where he'd spoken passionately about civic responsibility and public safety. The irony was bitter. "I thought you should know," Chun continued. "This is going to hit the news soon, and given your involvement and your recent decisions. You might want to prepare yourself. As the call ended, Olivia sat in the darkness, her mind reeling. The faceless drunk driver who had shattered so many lives now had a name, a face, and political connections. She knew instinctively that this would complicate everything. By the time the sun rose, casting long shadows across her sparse new apartment, Olivia's phone was buzzing constantly with notifications. The story had broken, and the media frenzy was in full swing. She watched, a mix of anger and disbelief roiling in her stomach, as news anchors debated the implications of a city councilman's involvement in a fatal drunk driving accident. A text from Michael flashed across her screen. "Are you seeing this? Call me." Olivia's fingers hovered over the phone, but before she could reply, another call came through. Her father. "Olivia." Richard Hartley's voice was clipped, businesslike. "I assume you've heard the news. We need to talk strategy. This Mercer situation could be an opportunity for us to stop right there." "Dad," Olivia interrupted, a newfound steel in her voice. "If you're calling to try and use this tragedy for business leverage, I'm not interested." There was a pause. Then Richard spoke again, his tone softer. "Livy, I know we didn't part on the best terms, but I'm worried about you. This crusade you're on, it's going to put you in the crosshairs of some very powerful people. Let me help you navigate this." For a moment, Olivia felt a pang of longing for the security of her old life, for the protective embrace of her family's influence. But then she thought of Michael, of the lives destroyed by one man's reckless actions, and her resolve hardened. "I appreciate the concern, Dad," she said firmly, "but I can handle this. Goodbye." As she ended the call, Olivia felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was truly on her own now, standing on the precipice of something much bigger than she had initially imagined. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Olivia met with the lawyers she'd hired to set up her foundation, strategizing on how to respond to the new developments. She fielded calls from journalists seeking comments, carefully crafting her responses to focus on the broader issues of drunk driving and accountability rather than attacking Mercer directly. It was late afternoon when she finally made it to Michael's apartment. She found him pacing in his living room, the TV blaring in the background with yet another news update on the Mercer situation. "Can you believe this?" Michael's voice was tight with barely contained fury. "He gets to wake up, to have a second chance, while my family..." He trailed off, his grief palpable in the small room. Olivia approached him cautiously, placing a hand on his arm. "I know, Michael, it's not fair, but we can use this. Mercer's involvement means this story isn't going away. We can push for real change now." Michael turned to her, his eyes blazing with a mix of pain and determination. "You're right. We need to make sure Sarah and Emily didn't die for nothing. What's our next move?" As they sat together, planning their strategy, Olivia felt a shift in the air between them. They were no longer just two strangers connected by tragedy, but partners in a fight for justice. Their discussion was interrupted by a knock at the door. Michael opened it to reveal Detective Chun, her expression grave. "I'm glad you're both here," she said, stepping inside. "There's something you need to know. The investigation into the accident, it's being shut down." "What?" Olivia and Michael exclaimed in unison. Chun held up a hand, her frustration evident. "Orders from above. Mercer's got friends in high places, and they're pushing for this to be handled internally. I'm being taken off the case." The implications of Chun's words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just about one drunk driving accident anymore. It was about power, corruption, and a system that protected its own at the expense of justice. Olivia felt a surge of anger unlike anything she'd experienced before. "They can't do this. We won't let them." Michael nodded, his jaw set. "What can we do?" Chun looked between them, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Officially, my hands are tied, but off the record, I want to help. This isn't right, and I took an oath to serve and protect. If you're going to fight this, I want in." As the three of them began to plan, Olivia felt a sense of purpose solidifying within her. This was no longer just about setting up a foundation or changing a few laws. They were up against a system that had been protecting the powerful and privileged for far too long. The sun was setting over the city as Olivia left Michael's apartment, her mind racing with everything they had discussed. As she walked to her car, she felt the weight of eyes on her. Turning, she caught a glimpse of a man in a dark suit ducking behind a parked van. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the implications. She was being watched, the powers that be saw her as a threat. Sliding into her car, Olivia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She had started this journey seeking personal redemption, a way to give meaning to the tragedy she had survived. But now, she understood that she was on the front lines of a much larger battle. As she drove through the darkening streets, the city's glittering skyline, a stark reminder of the wealth and power arrayed against her, Olivia made a silent vow. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, she would see this through. For Michael, for Sarah and Emily, and for every other victim of a system that valued privilege over justice. The real fight was just beginning, and Olivia Hartley was ready for war. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Olivia, Michael, and Detective Chen worked tirelessly to build their case and rally support. They knew they were up against powerful forces, but the groundswell of public outrage over Councilman Mercer's involvement in the accident gave them an opening they couldn't afford to waste. Olivia threw herself into the work with a fervor that surprised even her. She spent her days meeting with advocacy groups, giving interviews to sympathetic journalists, and poring over legal documents with a team of pro bono lawyers who had rallied to their cause. Her nights were filled with strategy sessions that often stretched into the early hours of the morning. It was during one of these late-night meetings, huddled around Michael's kitchen table with Chun and a handful of trusted eyes, that they got their first real break. "I've got something," Chun said, her voice low and urgent as she slid a manila folder across the table. "A source inside the police department slipped me this. It's not much, but it's a start." Olivia opened the folder with trembling hands, her heart racing as she scanned the documents inside. They were internal memos, carefully redacted but still damning. They suggested a pattern of covering up drunk driving incidents involving high-profile individuals, with Mercer's name appearing more than once. "This is huge," Michael breathed, looking over Olivia's shoulder. "But how do we use it without compromising your source, Sarah?" Detective Chen's face was grim. "We need to be careful. If they find out I have these documents, I'll lose more than just my job. But we can't sit on this information either." Olivia felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. She knew that what they did next could make or break their entire campaign. "We need to get this information out there, but in a way that protects our sources and gives us plausible deniability. I think I have an idea." Over the next few days, Olivia worked with a team of trusted journalists and online activists to create a secure whistleblowing platform. They carefully leaked snippets of information, just enough to spark public interest and pressure the authorities for a more thorough investigation. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded with outrage, and protests began to spring up outside City Hall. Olivia watched from the sidelines, a mix of exhilaration and fear coursing through her veins as she saw the movement they had started taking on a life of its own. But with increased visibility came increased risk. Olivia began to notice more unmarked cars parked outside her apartment, more suspicious glances from strangers on the street. She knew she was being watched, and the knowledge sent a chill down her spine. It was Michael who first suggested she needed protection. "You're the face of this movement now, Olivia," he said during one of their strategy sessions. "If anything happens to you, it could derail everything we've worked for." Olivia wanted to protest, to insist that she could take care of herself, but she knew he was right. The stakes were too high to take unnecessary risks. Reluctantly, she agreed to hire a small security team, former police officers recommended by Chun, who were sympathetic to their cause. As the pressure mounted, Olivia found herself turning to Michael more and more for support. There was something about his quiet strength, his unwavering commitment to their cause, that grounded her in moments of doubt. She began to realize that her feelings for him were evolving beyond mere partnership or friendship, but she pushed those thoughts aside. There would be time for personal reflection later. Right now, they had a battle to fight. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday morning, exactly 6 weeks after the accident that had changed everything. Olivia was in the middle of a live television interview, passionately arguing for stricter drunk driving laws, when her phone began to buzz incessantly in her pocket. As soon as the camera stopped rolling, she checked her messages and felt her heart skip a beat. It was from Chun, just 2 words. "It's happening." Olivia raced across town to the courthouse, arriving just in time to see a grim-faced Councilman Mercer being led out in handcuffs. The evidence they had painstakingly gathered, combined with the relentless public pressure, had finally forced the district attorney's office to act. As reporters swarmed around her, shouting questions, Olivia felt a hand on her arm. She turned to see Michael beside her, his eyes shining with a mix of emotions, grief, vindication, and something else she couldn't quite name. "We did it," he said softly, his voice nearly drowned out by the chaos around them. "Sarah and Emily, they'd be proud." Olivia squeezed his hand, words that felt insufficient to express what she was feeling. This was a victory, yes, but it was only the beginning. They had exposed one corrupt official, but the system that had protected him for so long remained largely intact. As they pushed through the crowd of reporters, Olivia caught sight of her father standing at the edge of the throng. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and she saw a flicker of something in his gaze. Pride, perhaps, or regret. But before she could process it, he turned and disappeared into the crowd. That night, as the city buzzed with the news of Mercer's arrest, Olivia found herself standing on the balcony of her apartment, looking out over the skyline. The lights of the city seemed different now, less a symbol of untouchable power and more a reminder of the countless lives affected by the changes they were fighting for. Michael joined her, leaning on the railing beside her. For a long moment, they stood in comfortable silence, the weight of the day's events settling around them. "What happens now?" Michael finally asked, his voice quiet but steady. Olivia turned to him, struck by the intensity in his gaze. "Now," she said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose flooding through her, "we keep fighting." Mercer was just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more work to do. As she spoke, Olivia realized that somewhere along the way, her mission had evolved. What had started as a personal quest for redemption had become something much larger, a fight for systemic change, for justice, for a city where tragedies like the one that had brought them together would become a thing of the past. Michael nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said, reaching out to take her hand. As their fingers intertwined, Olivia felt a spark of electricity run through her. In that moment, with the city spread out before them and the promise of battles yet to come, she knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. Powerful interests would resist their efforts at every turn. But as Olivia stood there, hand in hand with Michael, she felt ready for whatever came next. They had taken on the system and won their first major victory. It was just the beginning, but it was a beginning filled with hope. As the night deepened around them, Olivia and Michael remained on the balcony, planning their next moves, drawing strength from each other's presence. The city below them hummed with the energy of change, a change they had set in motion. And in that moment, despite all the challenges that lay ahead, Olivia knew with unshakable certainty that they were exactly where they were meant to be, doing exactly what they were meant to do. The aftermath of Councilman Mercer's arrest sent shockwaves through the city's political landscape. As the dust began to settle, Olivia and her team found themselves thrust into the spotlight like never before. News outlets clamored for interviews, social media buzzed with their names, and invitations to speak at various events flooded in. But with increased visibility came new challenges. Olivia soon discovered that not everyone viewed their crusade as positively as she had hoped. One morning, she woke to find her face plastered across the front page of a local tabloid, accompanied by a scathing headline, "Heiress, Crusader or Attention Seeker?" The article dredged up details from Olivia's past party girl antics, a string of failed relationships, her privileged upbringing, painting her as a bored socialite playing at activism. It was a brutal character assassination, clearly designed to discredit her and undermine their cause. Olivia felt the sting of the words acutely, but it was Michael's reaction that truly surprised her. She found him in their makeshift office, poring over the article with a look of barely contained fury. "This is bull," he spat, slamming the paper down on the desk. "They're trying to distract from the real issues by attacking you personally. We can't let them get away with this." Olivia placed a hand on his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "Michael, it's okay. We knew there would be pushback. This just means we're making them nervous." He turned to her, his eyes blazing with an intensity that took her breath away. "No, it's not okay. You've sacrificed everything for this cause. Your family, your inheritance, your safety. They don't get to drag your name through the mud like this." In that moment, Olivia realized just how much Michael had come to mean to her. His fierce protectiveness, his unwavering support. It stirred something deep within her. But before she could respond, Detective Chun burst into the room, her face grave. "We've got a problem," she said without preamble. "My source in the department just warned me. They're planning to raid our office. Tonight, the news hit like a bucket of ice water. They had known they were under scrutiny, but this was a direct attack." Olivia's mind raced, trying to process the implications. "Why?" Michael demanded. "We haven't done anything illegal." Chun's expression was grim. "They're claiming they have evidence of illegal information gathering. It's bogus, of course, but they're using it as an excuse to shut us down and seize our files." Olivia felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. They had been careful, but there were still documents that could compromise their sources if they fell into the wrong hands. They couldn't let that happen. "We need to move," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Now, get everything essential packed up. Destroy anything we can't take with us. We'll regroup at the safe house." The next few hours were a blur of activity. They worked feverishly, sorting through mountains of documents, hard drives, and notes. Anything that couldn't be safely moved was shredded or burned. Olivia felt a pang of regret as she watched years of work go up in flames, but she knew it was necessary. As night fell, they loaded the last of their essential materials into Michael's battered old van. Olivia took one last look around the office that had been their base of operations for months. It felt like the end of something, but she refused to let it be the end of their fight. They split up, taking different routes to the safe house, a small cabin on the outskirts of the city that Olivia had purchased through a shell company. As she drove through the darkened streets, constantly checking her rearview mirror for signs of pursuit, Olivia's mind whirled with possibilities and plans. She arrived at the cabin to find Michael and Chun already there, unloading equipment. As soon as she stepped out of her car, Michael was by her side, his hand on her arm. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low and concerned. Olivia nodded, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over her. "I'm fine, just processing everything." They worked in silence for a while, setting up their equipment and securing the perimeter of the cabin. It was well past midnight when they finally allowed themselves to rest, gathering around the small kitchen table with mugs of strong coffee. "So," Chun said, breaking the tense silence, "what's our next move?" Olivia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of leadership settling on her shoulders once again. "We need to go on the offensive. They're trying to paint us as criminals, to discredit our work. We need to show the public what we're really fighting for." Michael nodded, his eyes gleaming with renewed determination. "We could use the raid to our advantage. Show how desperate they are to shut us down. It could rally more support to our cause." As they brainstormed strategies, Olivia felt a familiar fire igniting within her. Yes, they had been forced into hiding, but this was far from over. In fact, it was an opportunity to push their campaign to the next level. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly from their new base. Olivia gave a series of carefully orchestrated interviews, framing the raid as a desperate attempt by corrupt officials to silence them. Michael reached out to their network of supporters, mobilizing protests and social media campaigns. Chun worked her contacts, gathering more evidence of systemic corruption. Their efforts began to bear fruit. Public opinion, which had wavered after the tabloid attack, began to swing back in their favor. More whistleblowers came forward, emboldened by their resilience. The narrative was shifting, and Olivia could sense that they were on the cusp of something big. It was during this intense period of work that Olivia and Michael's relationship began to evolve. Long nights of strategy sessions blurred into intimate conversations. Shared moments of triumph and despair brought them closer. Olivia found herself drawn to Michael's quiet strength, his unwavering commitment to their cause, and the depth of emotion she saw in his eyes when he looked at her. One night, as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky, Michael turned to her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Olivia," he said softly, "I need you to know something. When I lost Sarah and Emily, I thought my life was over. I didn't see any point in going on. But working with you, fighting for this cause, it's given me a reason to live again. You've given me a reason." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes. She reached out, taking Michael's hand in hers. "Michael, But before she could finish, Chun burst out of the cabin, her face flushed with excitement. "Guys, you need to see this." Now, they rushed inside to find Chun hunched over a laptop, frantically typing. "My source just sent this over. It's huge." As they crowded around the screen, Olivia felt her breath catch in her throat. What they were seeing was nothing short of explosive, a trove of documents and emails, revealing a vast network of corruption that extended far beyond Councilman Mercer, implicating high-ranking officials, business leaders, and even members of law enforcement. "This is it," Michael breathed, his eyes wide. "This is what we've been looking for." Olivia nodded, feeling a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. With this information, they could blow the whole corrupt system wide open. But she knew that releasing it would also paint an enormous target on their backs. As she looked between Michael and Chun, seeing the determination in their eyes, Olivia knew there was no turning back. They had started this fight seeking justice for a personal tragedy, but it had become something much larger. They were now on the verge of exposing corruption that had plagued their city for generations. "All right," Olivia said, her voice steady and resolute. "Let's do this. It's time to bring it all down." As they began to plan their next moves, Olivia felt a surge of energy coursing through her. The road ahead would be dangerous, but with Michael by her side and the truth as their weapon, she felt ready to take on the world. The night deepened around them, but inside the small cabin, a fire burned bright, a beacon of hope and justice that would soon set their city ablaze. As dawn broke over the city, Olivia, Michael, and Chun were already hard at work, meticulously combing through the explosive documents they had received. The sheer scope of the corruption they were uncovering was staggering, an intricate web of kickbacks, cover-ups, and abuses of power that stretched back decades. "We need to be smart about how we release this," Olivia said, rubbing her tired eyes. "If we dump it all at once, they'll find a way to bury it or discredit us. We need to create a narrative, release it piece by piece for maximum impact." Michael nodded, his face etched with determination. "Agreed. We should start with the most damning evidence against the highest-ranking officials. Hit them where it hurts right out of the gate." As they strategized, Chen was busy setting up secure communication channels with trusted journalists and activists. They knew that once they started releasing the information, they would become bigger targets than ever before. Secrecy and caution were paramount. Over the next few weeks, they orchestrated a carefully planned series of information drops. Each release was timed for maximum impact, accompanied by detailed analysis and corroborating evidence. The effect was electric. The first bombshell implicated the city's police commissioner in a long-running scheme to protect wealthy drunk drivers from prosecution. The public outcry was immediate and fierce. Protesters flooded the streets, demanding accountability. Next came revelations about a network of corrupt judges who had been taking bribes to dismiss cases against powerful defendants. The legal community was thrown into chaos, with bar associations calling for widespread investigations and reforms. With each new revelation, the city's power structure began to crumble. Officials resigned in disgrace, arrests were made, and long-buried scandals came to light. Olivia watched it all unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and trepidation. They were making a real difference, but she knew the backlash would be severe. Throughout it all, Michael was her rock. His unwavering support and quiet strength kept her grounded when the pressure threatened to overwhelm her. Late one night, as they pored over documents for their next release, Olivia found herself watching him, struck by the intensity of her feelings. "Michael," she said softly, causing him to look up from his work. I need you to know something. This fight, everything we've been through, I couldn't have done it without you. You've become more than just a partner in this cause. You've become..." She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. Michael's eyes softened as he reached out to take her hand. "Olivia," he began, his voice thick with emotion. But before he could continue, Chun burst into the room, her face pale. "We've got a problem. A big one." She thrust a laptop in front of them, showing a breaking news story. Olivia felt her blood run cold as she read the headline. "Whistleblower's safe house located. Raid imminent." "How?" Michael demanded, jumping to his feet. "We were so careful." Chun shook her head, her expression grim. "I don't know, but we need to move now." The next hour was a blur of frantic activity as they scrambled to pack up their essential equipment and documents. Olivia's mind raced, trying to figure out their next move. They had known this day might come, but facing it was still terrifying. As they loaded the last of their gear into their vehicles, Olivia turned to her companions. "We need to split up," she said, hating the words even as she spoke them. "It's too dangerous for us to stay together. We'll rendezvous at the backup location in 48 hours. Michael started to protest, but Chun cut him off. "She's right. We're stronger apart right now. They can't catch all of us." With heavy hearts, they said their goodbyes. As Olivia watched Michael drive away, she felt a painful tightness in her chest. She silently promised herself that this wouldn't be the last time she saw him. Olivia drove through the night, taking a circuitous route to throw off any potential tails. Her mind whirled with plans and contingencies. They had known their fight would be dangerous, but the reality of being hunted was still shocking. As she drove, Olivia found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed in such a short time. She had gone from a privileged heiress to a fugitive whistleblower, hunted by the very system she had once been a part of. And yet, she realized she had never felt more alive, more purposeful. Her thoughts were interrupted by the buzz of her secure phone. It was a message from one of their media contacts. "New information received. Ties to your father's company. Urgent response needed." Olivia felt her heart drop. Her father, despite their estrangement, she had always held out hope that he wasn't involved in the corruption they were exposing. But now, she pulled over to the side of the road, her hands shaking as she dialed a number she hadn't used in months. "Olivia?" Her father's voice was a mixture of surprise and concern. "Where are you? Are you safe?" "Dad," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I need to know the truth. Are you involved in this? The kickbacks, the cover-ups?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Richard Hartley spoke again, his voice was heavy with resignation. "Olivia, it's complicated. The business world, the political landscape. There are things you don't understand." Olivia felt a wave of disappointment and anger wash over her. "No, Dad, it's not complicated. It's wrong, and we're going to expose all of it." She ended the call, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. Her father's involvement was a blow, but it only strengthened her determination to see this through. As she pulled back onto the road, Olivia's mind was already racing with plans. They would need to accelerate their timeline, release everything they had before it could be suppressed. It would be risky, but they were out of options. She drove through the night, the city lights fading behind her as she headed towards the rendezvous point. Whatever came next, Olivia knew that the final battle was approaching. Everything they had worked for, everything they had sacrificed, it all came down to this. As the sun began to rise on the horizon, Olivia felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. They were in the eye of the storm now, and the worst was yet to come. But she was ready. With Michael and Chun by her side, with the truth as their weapon, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The road stretched out before her, a path into an uncertain future. But for the first time in her life, Olivia Hartley knew exactly who she was and what she was fighting for. And that, she realized, made all the difference. The rendezvous point was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. its rusted metal walls a far cry from the luxurious spaces Olivia had once called home. As she approached, her heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and fear, she scanned the area for any signs of surveillance or danger. Relief flooded through her as she spotted Michael's battered van parked discreetly behind the building. He was safe. As she pulled up beside it, the side door slid open, and Michael emerged, his face a mixture of relief and concern. "Olivia," he breathed, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Thank God you're all right." She allowed herself a moment to sink into his arms, drawing strength from his presence before pulling back. "Chun?" she asked, glancing around. Michael's expression tightened. "Not here yet, but she's got another 12 hours before we need to worry." They made their way inside the warehouse, where Michael had already set up a makeshift command center. Laptops hummed, surrounded by stacks of documents and hastily scrawled notes. It was a far cry from their previous setup, but it would have to do. As they settled in, Olivia filled Michael in on her conversation with her father. She could see the shock and anger play across his face as she recounted Richard Hartley's evasive responses. "I'm so sorry, Olivia," Michael said softly, reaching out to take her hand. "I know how much you hoped he wasn't involved." Olivia squeezed his hand, drawing comfort from the contact. "It just makes what we're doing even more important. We can't let personal connections cloud our judgment. Everyone involved needs to be held accountable." As they began to plan their next moves, the secure line they had set up for Chun buzzed to life. Both of them froze, then scrambled to answer it. "Chun?" Olivia said urgently. "Where are you? Are you safe?" There was a moment of static. Then Chun's voice came through, tense and breathless. "I'm okay, but they're closing in. I don't think I can make it to the rendezvous point." Michael leaned in, his face etched with concern. "What do you need? Where can we meet you?" "No." Chun's voice was firm. "It's too risky. I've got a plan, but I need you two to focus on getting the information out. I've uploaded everything I have to our secure server. The password is Phoenix Rising. Use it wisely." Before they could protest, the line went dead. Olivia and Michael shared a look of anguish and determination. Chun had sacrificed herself to give them a chance, and they couldn't let it be in vain. Over the next few hours, they worked feverishly, combing through the new information Chun had provided. It was a goldmine: detailed financial records, incriminating emails, even recorded conversations. With this, they could blow the entire corrupt system wide open. As dawn broke, casting long shadows across the warehouse floor, Olivia and Michael finalized their plan. They would release everything, all at once, through multiple channels: news outlets, social media, dedicated websites, a flood of information too vast to be suppressed or ignored. "Once we do this, there's no going back," Michael said, his voice low and serious. "We'll be the most wanted people in the city." Olivia nodded, feeling a strange calm settle over her. "I know, but it's the right thing to do. It's what we've been fighting for all along." Their eyes met, and in that moment, all the unspoken feelings between them seemed to crystallize. Michael reached down, cupping Olivia's face gently in his hands. "Olivia," he said softly, "I need you to know, whatever happens next, these past months with you have given my life meaning again. You've helped me heal, given me a purpose. I love you." Olivia felt tears welling up in her eyes as she leaned into his touch. "I love you too, Michael. Through all of this, you've been my strength, my partner. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Their lips met in a kiss that was both tender and fierce, a promise and a declaration. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing heavily, their eyes shining with emotion and determination. "All right," Olivia said, turning back to the computers. "Let's change the world." With a shared nod, they began the upload process. As gigabytes of damning information flooded onto the internet, Olivia felt a mixture of exhilaration and fear. They had just lit the fuse on a bomb that would shake the city to its very foundations. Within hours, the effects of their information dump began to ripple outward. News alerts blared from their phones. Social media exploded with outrage and disbelief, and the sound of distant sirens filled the air as law enforcement scrambled to respond. Olivia and Michael watched it all unfold on their screens, barely breathing as they saw the fruits of their labor. Prominent figures were being arrested, emergency press conferences were being called, and citizens were taking to the streets in protest. "It's working," Michael breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "It's really working." But their elation was short-lived. A sudden banging on the warehouse door made them both jump. Voices shouted from outside, "Police," demanding they surrender. "We need to go," Olivia said urgently, already moving to grab their essential equipment. "There's a back exit. If we can make it to the car." Her words were cut off by the sound of breaking glass as smoke grenades crashed through the windows. Thick, acrid smoke began to fill the warehouse. Michael grabbed her hand, pulling her towards the back of the building. "Come on!" They ran, coughing and stumbling through the smoke. Olivia could hear the sound of boots on metal as officers began to storm the building. Her heart pounded in her ears as they burst through the back door into the early morning light. Their car was just a few yards away. Freedom was so close. But as they sprinted across the open ground, a shout rang out behind them. "Freeze! Police!" Olivia felt Michael's hand tighten on hers. They were so close. If they could just make it to the car. A shout rang out, the sound echoing off the warehouse walls. Olivia felt Michael's hand slip from hers as he stumbled, a cry of pain escaping his lips. "Michael!" she screamed, turning to see him fall to his knees, clutching his leg. Blood seeped between his fingers. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Olivia knew she had a choice to make. The car was right there. She could make it, could escape and continue their fight from the shadows. Or she could stay with Michael, facing whatever came next together. It wasn't really a choice at all. Olivia dropped to her knees beside Michael, wrapping her arms around him as police officers surrounded them, weapons drawn. "I'm sorry," Michael gasped, his face contorted with pain. "I'm so sorry, Olivia." She held him tighter, her voice fierce in his ear. "Don't you dare apologize. We're in this together, remember? Always." As handcuffs were clasped around their wrists and they were pulled to their feet, Olivia met Michael's eyes. Despite the pain and fear, she saw a glimmer of hope there. They had done it. The truth was out. Whatever happened next, they had changed things for the better. As they were led away, Olivia held her head high. They might have lost this battle, but the war for justice was far from over. And she knew, with unshakable certainty, that as long as she had Michael by her side, they could face anything. The future was uncertain, fraught with challenges and dangers. But for the first time in her life, Olivia Hartley was exactly where she needed to be, fighting for what she believed in, with the man she loved by her side. And that, she realized, was a victory in itself. The processing center at the city's central police station buzzed with frantic energy. Officers rushed back and forth, phones rang incessantly, and the air was thick with tension. In the midst of this chaos, Olivia and Michael sat side by side on a hard bench, their hands cuffed behind their backs. Despite the gravity of their situation, Olivia felt an odd sense of calm. She glanced at Michael, noting the tight set of his jaw and the paleness of his face. The makeshift bandage on his leg was already stained with blood. "How's the leg?" she asked softly, wishing she could reach out and touch him. Michael managed a wry smile. "I've had worse paper cuts. Don't worry about me." Single quotes. Before Olivia could respond, a familiar voice cut through the noise of the station. "Where are they? I demand to see my daughter immediately." Olivia's heart sank as she recognized her father's authoritative tone. Moments later, Richard Hartley burst into view, his normally impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. His eyes locked onto Olivia, a storm of emotions playing across his face. Relief, anger, concern, and something that looked almost like pride. "Dad," Olivia said, her voice steady. "I'm surprised to see you here." Richard approached, his gaze flicking between Olivia and Michael. "Did you really think I wouldn't come? Olivia, do you have any idea what you've done?" "We exposed the truth," Michael interjected, his voice firm despite his obvious pain. "We did what was right." Richard's eyes narrowed as he regarded Michael. "And who exactly are you to decide what's right? Do you understand the chaos you've unleashed?" Olivia felt a surge of anger. "That chaos is justice, Dad. It's accountability, something this city has needed for a long time. Before Richard could respond, a stern-looking detective approached. "Mar, Hartley, I'm going to have to ask you to step back. We need to process the suspects." Richard bristled at the word suspects, but nodded curtly. As he was led away, he turned back to Olivia. "This isn't over. I'll get you the best lawyers. We'll fight this." Olivia watched him go, a mixture of emotions swirling within her. Even now, her father was trying to protect her, to fix things, but she knew there was no going back. The path ahead would be difficult, but it was one she had chosen. The next few hours were a blur of fingerprinting, mugshots, and terse questioning. Olivia and Michael remained steadfast, refusing to give any information beyond their names and asserting their right to legal counsel. It was late in the evening when they were finally led to separate holding cells. As the door clanged shut behind her, Olivia felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She sank onto the narrow cot, her mind racing despite her fatigue. She thought of Chun, hoping against hope that their colleague had managed to evade capture. She thought of the information they had released, wondering how it was being received, how it was changing things. And she thought of Michael, separated from her now, but still so present in her heart. Sleep eluded her as the night wore on. The harsh fluorescent lights never dimmed, and the sounds of the station doors slamming, voices calling out, the occasional cry of distress were a constant backdrop. It was nearing dawn when a commotion outside her cell caught Olivia's attention. She sat up, straining to hear what was happening. "You can't just barge in here." An officer's voice, indignant and alarmed. "I have every right to see my client." This voice was unfamiliar, crisp, and authoritative. "Now, are you going to open this door, or do I need to make some calls?" Moments later, Olivia's cell door swung open. A woman strode in, impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, her eyes keen and assessing behind stylish glasses. "Ms. Hartley," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Amelia Rojas. I'll be representing you and Mr. Reeves." Olivia shook the offered hand, her mind whirling. I don't understand." "My father was not the one who sent me," Amelia interrupted with a small smile. "Let's just say you have some powerful friends who believe in what you're doing. Now, we don't have much time. I need you to tell me everything." Over the next hour, Olivia recounted their story, from the accident that had started it all to the dramatic raid on the warehouse. Amelia listened intently, occasionally jotting notes on a sleek tablet. "All right," she said when Olivia had finished. "Here's where we stand. The charges against you are serious. Unauthorized access to government systems, dissemination of classified information, obstruction of justice." But she held up a hand as Olivia started to protest. "We have a strong case for whistleblower protection. The information you released is clearly in the public interest, exposing widespread corruption." Olivia nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope. "What about Michael? Is he okay?" Amelia's expression softened slightly. "Mr. Reeves is stable. He's been treated for his injury and is under guard at the hospital. I'll be meeting with him later today." As Amelia outlined their legal strategy, Olivia felt her spirits lifting. They had known there would be consequences for their actions, but now it seemed they had a fighting chance. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of a grim-faced officer. "Miss Hartley, you're being transferred to the county jail to await arraignment." Amelia stood, her posture radiating confidence. "My client will not be transferred anywhere without my presence, and I believe you'll find that bail has already been posted." The officer looked taken aback, fumbling with his radio to confirm. Olivia watched in amazement as Amelia effortlessly took control of the situation, deftly navigating the bureaucracy and asserting Olivia's rights at every turn. Within the hour, Olivia found herself walking out of the police station, blinking in the bright morning sunlight. Amelia stood beside her, fielding questions from a small group of reporters that had gathered outside. "Ms. Hartley and Mar, Reeves maintain their innocence and look forward to their day in court," Amelia stated firmly. "The information they brought to light is of vital public interest, exposing a level of corruption that demands immediate action. We are confident that justice will prevail." As they made their way to a waiting car, Olivia's mind was racing. "Where are we going?" "And Michael, Mr. Reeves will be released into our custody as soon as he's medically cleared, Amelia assured her. For now, we're taking you to a secure location. There's someone you need to meet. The car wound its way through the city streets, which seemed to pulse with an unusual energy. Olivia could see groups of people gathered on corners, animatedly discussing something. News tickers on buildings flashed headlines about arrests and investigations. They pulled up to a nondescript office building on the outskirts of the financial district. Amelia led Olivia inside and up to a spacious conference room with a spectacular view of the city skyline. As they entered, a familiar figure rose to greet them. Olivia gasped in surprise and relief. "Chun, you're all right." Detective Sarah Chun smiled, looking tired but triumphant. "Takes more than a few corrupt cops to bring me down. It's good to see you, Olivia." As they embraced, Olivia noticed other people in the room. Journalists, lawyers, and civic leaders she recognized from their work. Chun gestured for Olivia to take a seat at the head of the table. "Welcome," Chun said, her voice carrying a note of pride, to the headquarters of the New City Initiative. "Thanks to the information you and Michael released, we've got a real chance to clean up this city, and we want you to lead the charge." Olivia looked around the room, overwhelmed by the support and determination she saw in every face. For the first time since their arrest, she felt the full impact of what they had accomplished. They had started a movement, sparked a revolution. As the group began to discuss next steps, legal challenges, public awareness campaigns, policy reforms, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose flooding through her. The road ahead would be challenging, but they were no longer fighting alone. Her thoughts turned to Michael, recovering in the hospital, but soon to join them. Together, they had risked everything for the truth. And now, against all odds, they had a chance to see their vision of a just and transparent city become a reality. Olivia Hartley, once a privileged heiress, now stood at the forefront of a movement for change. As she looked out over the city she had grown to love in an entirely new way, she knew that the greatest challenges and the greatest triumphs still lay ahead. But with Michael by her side, and with the support of this passionate group of allies, Olivia felt ready to face whatever came next. The fight for justice was far from over, but for the first time, victory seemed not just possible, but inevitable. The days that followed were a wind of activity. The New City Initiative headquarters became a hub of constant motion, with people coming and going at all hours, phones ringing off the hook, and strategy sessions that often stretched late into the night. Olivia threw herself into the work with renewed vigor. She coordinated with journalists to ensure the exposed information reached the widest possible audience, worked with legal teams to protect whistleblowers who were coming forward in the wake of their revelations, and began to draft policy proposals for sweeping reforms. But despite the excitement and sense of purpose that filled her days, Olivia felt incomplete. Michael's absence was a constant ache, a hollow space at her side that nothing else could fill. It was nearly a week after her release when Amelia finally brought the news Olivia had been desperately waiting for. "He's being released this afternoon," Amelia said, a rare smile softening her usually stern features. "I'm heading to the hospital now to handle the paperwork. He'll be here by evening." Olivia felt her heart soar. "Can I come with you?" "I want to be there when..." Amelia held up a hand, her expression sympathetic but firm. "I know you do, but it's not safe. There are still people out there who would love to get their hands on either of you. Let me bring him here, where we can ensure his security." Reluctantly, Olivia nodded. She knew Amelia was right, but the thought of waiting even a few more hours to see Michael was almost unbearable. The rest of the day passed in a blur of impatience. Olivia tried to focus on her work, but found her mind constantly wandering, imagining the moment when Michael would walk through the door. As evening fell, casting long shadows across the bustling office, Olivia found herself gravitating towards the window. She stared out at the city skyline, the lights twinkling like stars against the darkening sky. So much had changed in such a short time, both in the world around her and within herself. A sudden hush fell over the office, pulling Olivia from her reverie. She turned, her heart leaping into her throat as she saw Michael standing in the doorway, leaning slightly on a cane but very much alive and present. For a moment, Neither of them moved. Then, as if drawn by an irresistible force, they were in each other's arms. Olivia buried her face in Michael's chest, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. "I missed you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "God, I missed you so much." Michael's arms tightened around her. "I'm here now," he murmured into her hair. "We're together. That's all that matters." As they stood there, holding each other close, the world around them seemed to fade away. All the challenges they faced, all the work still to be done. In that moment, none of it mattered. They had found each other again, and together, they could face anything. A gentle cough broke the spell. They turned to see Chun standing nearby, her expression a mix of amusement and affection. "Hate to break up the reunion," she said, "but we've got some developments you both need to hear about." Reluctantly, Olivia and Michael separated, though their hands remained clasped as they followed Chun to the conference room. The core team of the New City Initiative was gathered there, faces both familiar and new. As they took their seats, Amelia stood, her expression serious. "First, the good news. The public response to the information you released has been overwhelming. Protests are continuing across the city, and we're seeing unprecedented demands for accountability and reform." She paused, her gaze sweeping the room. "Now for the challenges. The opposition is regrouping. They're trying to paint you as reckless vigilantes, claiming the information was obtained illegally and can't be used in court." Michael leaned forward, his jaw set. "But we were careful. We documented everything, followed proper whistleblower protocols." "We know," Chun interjected, "and we're fighting back hard on the legal front. But this isn't just a courtroom battle anymore. It's a fight for public opinion, for the very soul of the city." Olivia felt a familiar fire igniting within her. "So what's our next move?" A newcomer at the table spoke up, a sharp-eyed woman Olivia recognized as a prominent civil rights attorney. "We need to go on the offensive, not just with the information we have, but with a vision for what this city could be. People are angry, yes, but they're also scared. We need to give them hope, show them what a truly just and transparent government could look like." As the group began to brainstorm ideas, Olivia felt Michael's hand tighten around hers. She turned to see him watching her, a look of pride and love shining in his eyes. "What do you think?" she asked softly. Michael smiled, the warmth of it reaching his eyes. "I think you were born for this, Olivia. You have the passion, the vision. These people believe in you. Lead them." Olivia felt a surge of confidence. She stood, drawing the attention of the room. "All right," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Here's what we're going to do." Over the next hour, Olivia outlined a comprehensive strategy. They would continue to release information strategically, but also launch a massive public education campaign. Town halls, social media blitzes, partnerships with community organizations, all aimed at not just exposing corruption, but showing people how things could be different. "We're not just tearing down the old system," Olivia concluded, her eyes blazing with determination. "We're building a new one, together." The energy in the room was electric as people began to break into teams, assignments being handed out rapidly. Olivia felt a tap on her shoulder and turned to see Chun gesturing for her and Michael to follow. They slipped out onto a small balcony, the night air cool against their skin. Chun pulled out a small device and activated it, creating a low hum that would prevent any eavesdropping. "There's something else you need to know," she said, her voice low. "We've uncovered evidence of international connections. The corruption here, it's not isolated. It's part of a much larger network." Olivia and Michael exchanged a glance, the implications sinking in. "How big are we talking?" Michael asked. Chen's expression was grim, global. "We're looking at ties to foreign governments, multinational corporations, even terrorist organizations. This goes way beyond our city." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. They had known they were up against powerful forces, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Chun looked out over the city, her expression thoughtful. "For now, we focus on our fight here, but we need to be prepared. As we dig deeper, we're going to uncover things that can have international repercussions. We need to be smart, be strategic." Michael nodded, his face set with determination. We'll need more allies. Connections in other cities, other countries. Already working on it, Chan assured them. But I wanted you both to be aware. The stakes just got a lot higher. As Chen left them alone on the balcony, Olivia turned to Michael, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. Are we in over our heads? She asked softly. Michael pulled her close, his arms strong and reassuring around her. Maybe, he admitted, but we've come too far to back down now. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Olivia leaned into him, drawing strength from his presence. As they stood there, looking out over the city they were fighting to save, she felt a sense of destiny settling over her. They had started this journey seeking justice for a personal tragedy, but it had become something so much bigger. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger and challenges they couldn't yet imagine. But as Olivia stood there in Michael's arms, the night air filled with the sounds of a city on the brink of transformation, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. As dawn broke over the city, casting a golden glow across the skyline, Olivia stood at the window of her office, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. The past few months had been a whirlwind of activity, each day bringing new challenges and triumphs. The new city initiative had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. What had started as a small group of determined individuals had blossomed into a movement that spanned not just their city, but had tendrils reaching across the country and even internationally. A soft knock at the door pulled Olivia from her thoughts. She turned to see Michael entering, a warm smile on his face. "Early as always," he said, crossing the room to plant a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Ready for the big day?" Olivia nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Today was the day they would present their comprehensive reform package to the city council. Months of hard work, countless meetings, and painstaking negotiations had led to this moment. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, setting down her coffee cup. "How are you feeling? Is your leg bothering you?" Michael shook his head, though Olivia noticed he was leaning a bit more heavily on his cane than usual. The injury he'd sustained during their arrest had healed, but it still troubled him on occasion. "I'm fine. Just anxious to get this show on the road." As they made their way to the conference room for a final strategy meeting, Olivia marveled at how far they'd come. The exposed corruption had led to a wave of resignations and arrests, clearing the way for a new generation of leaders committed to transparency and accountability. But the fight was far from over. As Chun had warned them, the network of corruption extended far beyond their city. They had uncovered links to international crime syndicates, shadowy corporate interests, and even foreign governments attempting to influence local politics. The conference room was already buzzing with activity when they arrived. Chun was there, looking tired but determined as she pored over last-minute intelligence reports. Amelia Rojas, their indefatigable lawyer, was running through potential legal challenges with a team of paralegals. As Olivia took her place at the head of the table, a hush fell over the room. She looked around at the faces of her team, some she'd known from the beginning of this journey, others who had joined along the way. Each of them had sacrificed so much for this cause. "Before we go over the final details," Olivia began, her voice steady and clear, "I want to thank all of you. What we've accomplished, it's nothing short of miraculous. But we can't rest on our laurels. Today is just the beginning of the next phase of our fight." She outlined their strategy one last time, the key points of the reform package, potential opposition they might face, and contingency plans for various scenarios. As she spoke, Olivia felt a sense of calm determination settling over her. They were ready for this. As the meeting concluded and people began to file out, Michael approached Olivia, a slight frown creasing his brow. "What is it?" she asked, recognizing the look of concern in his eyes. Michael hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I just got word from one of our international contacts. There's chatter about a coordinated effort to discredit us. They're planning to release some kind of damaging information during the council meeting." Olivia felt her heart rate quicken. "Do we know what kind of information?" Michael shook his head. "Nothing specific, but we need to be prepared for anything." She nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "All right, let's talk to Chun, see if we can get ahead of this." As they made their way to City Hall, surrounded by a phalanx of supporters and security, Olivia couldn't shake a feeling of unease. They had faced opposition before, but this felt different. The stakes were higher than ever. The council chambers were packed when they arrived, a mix of supporters, opponents, and media filling every available seat. As Olivia took her place at the podium, she scanned the room, noting the tense expressions on the faces of several council members. Taking a deep breath, she began her presentation. She spoke of the corruption they had uncovered, the lives that had been destroyed by a system that prioritized profit and power over people. But more than that, she painted a picture of what their city could be, a beacon of transparency and justice, a model for the rest of the country to follow. As she neared the conclusion of her speech, Olivia saw a commotion at the back of the room. A man she didn't recognize was urgently whispering to one of the council members, passing over a thick folder. Her heart sank as she realized what was happening. This must be the damaging information Michael had warned her about. But as she watched, something unexpected happened. The council member, after glancing at the contents of the folder, stood up abruptly. "Madam Speaker," he called out, his voice ringing through the chamber, "I move that we suspend the normal rules of order. There's something the council and the public need to hear." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Olivia exchanged a glance with Michael, who looked just as confused as she felt. The council member made his way to the front of the room, the folder clutched tightly in his hands. As he reached the podium, he turned to face the audience, his expression a mix of shame and determination. "For years," he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I've been part of a system that I knew was corrupt. I told myself it was just how things worked, that I was protecting my constituents by playing the game. But the truth is, I was protecting myself and my powerful friends." He opened the folder, spreading out documents on the podium. "This was meant to be used to discredit Miss Hartley and her team, but I can't do it. Not anymore. Instead, I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. I'm going to tell the truth." What followed was a shocking confession. The council member laid bare years of backroom deals, kickbacks, and cover-ups. He named names, provided dates and amounts, and offered himself up for whatever consequences might follow. As he spoke, Olivia felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Shock, anger, vindication, and finally, a profound sense of hope. This was more than they could have ever planned for, a crack in the very foundation of the corrupt system they had been fighting against. When the council member finished speaking, the room erupted into chaos. Reporters were shouting questions, other council members were calling for order, and in the midst of it all, Olivia felt Michael's hand slip into hers. "What now?" he asked, his voice barely audible above the din. Olivia squeezed his hand, a smile spreading across her face. "Now," she said, "we build. This is the moment we've been waiting for. The old system is crumbling, and we have the chance to create something better in its place." As they made their way out of the council chambers, surrounded by a whirlwind of activity, Olivia felt a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in months. The road ahead would still be challenging. There were still powerful interests that would resist change, still corruption to be rooted out beyond their city's borders. But for the first time, it felt like they were truly turning a corner. The truth had a power all its own, and once unleashed, it couldn't be contained. That evening, as the sun set on a day that would go down in the city's history, Olivia and Michael stood on the balcony of their headquarters. The city stretched out before them, a tapestry of lights and shadows, of challenges and possibilities. "Do you ever think about how this all started?" Michael asked, his arm wrapped around Olivia's waist. That night, the accident, Olivia leaned into him, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "Every day," she said softly. "It's strange to think how much has changed. How much we've changed." Michael nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Do you regret any of it? Giving up your old life, taking on this fight?" Olivia turned to face him, cupping his face gently in her hands. "Not for a second," she said firmly. "This is who I was always meant to be, who we were meant to be, together." As they stood there, the city alive with the promise of change below them, Olivia felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The journey had been difficult, filled with dangers and sacrifices she could never have imagined. but it had also brought her purpose, love, and a chance to make a real difference in the world. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever battles they still had to fight, Olivia knew that this was just the beginning. With Michael by her side and a growing movement of dedicated allies behind them, they were ready to face whatever came next. The young heiress who had once lived a life of privilege was gone. In her place stood a leader, a fighter, a beacon of hope for a city, and perhaps a world in desperate need of change. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle above the city skyline, Olivia Hartley looked to the future with determination and hope. The hardest part of their journey was over, but the most important work was just beginning, and she was ready for it all. If you enjoyed this story, we'd love for you to support us by leaving a like and subscribing to our Slices of Life channel. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments. Which city are you talking about? It's very rewarding for us to provide our followers with an enjoyable moment. We appreciate the unconditional support you show us in every story. Blessings!